leather, bare flesh, and crab-like claws. You could be forgiven to think that that's just a regular weekend for Peach, but you'd be wrong. That is what Slaanesh is all about. However, not so fast or easy to paint. Or are they? I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Now, Slaanesh is my favourite chaos deity of choice, but what is Slaanesh? Well, Slaanesh is the god of excess, pleasure, and just weird stuff. He's not the smelly one, he's not the fighty one, he's not the magic-y, weird, conspiracy one. Slaanesh is the newer god that likes to wear leather, likes rich clothing and velvets, and, you know, all about excess and the deadly sins and all that. So, I mean, in a nutshell, just a bit of a weirdo. Bit like me. Great. So yeah, that's Slaanesh. But why Slaanesh? Why is Slaanesh my favourite? Well, actually, interestingly, I like the colour palette of Slaanesh. Now, you can go mad with the colour palette. You can go like really vibrant, bright colours. You can have every colour under the sun on one model, like the Noise Marine. Or you could just have like a palette that's very subtle and keeps to a certain theme. But one of the things that tends to be a common underrunning texture is things like leather, rich fabrics, lots of bare flesh, obviously. And then other things like purples. Purple tends to be quite a common colour with Slaanesh. Not sure why, but I like it. Purples and golds look beautiful together. Emperor's Children, look very, very nice. And I think that's why I've been a big fan of Slaanesh, because of the colours. And some of the choices of models that they make as well, because they're pretty cool. But, you know, it's my kink. It's what I like. I know what I like, and I like Slaanesh. Now, quick disclaimer, there may be a slight, I'm going to put a slight nudity warning out here, because there's going to be some butt cheek and there's going to be the odd nipple, whether that's stuff I'm painting or the odd picture I put up. So yeah, it's not a lot. It's not like really inappropriate. It's just a little bit of side butt, a little bit of nipple. It's just the models. I can't help it. They made them. So yes, be wary if those kind of things do freak you out. Don't know why they would, because we all have them. It's just normal. Everyone's got them. So first up is going to be the Myrmidesh Painbringer. There is a twofer in the kit, so the other build is a Myrmidesh Saberite, if I said that right. I'll put it up if I've not. So you get the two variants in there. The other variant, which is the Saberites, they have more like exposed heads, weird looking faces, and different weapon options, but pretty much it's the same body build. Now, one of the things I do like about these is they're coated in armour, which makes it a lot easier to paint figures when they're coated in armour, because you can just spray them the armour colour and then pick out other details. So for this, I'm going to be starting off with a gold undercoat and then just picking out some details. And I think they're quite a quick scheme. So if you want to get lots of these guys in your army and you want to get them painted really quickly, I think this is going to be a perfect sort of starting point for you. So let's crack on with the Myrmidesh Painbringer. So from a gold undercoat, we're just going to start base coating some of the cloth. And for this, we're going to start off using Diabolic Plum. It's a nice sort of magenta tone, and well, Slaanesh look great with purples and pinks and magentas. So we're just going to work our way around all those cloth details and plumes as well. I know they're slightly different textures, but actually just using the same colour helps balance it across the model. Next up is just to black out all the black details. I mean, only black will do. Whatever you've got at hand, it's just black. So thin it down a little bit if you need to. I always like to thin it down because then it runs into cracks a bit more and gives you a nice line ready. So when you're doing straps and stuff, when you add a second coat, you're doing less work basically. So just work your way around all these straps. Thing with Slaanesh is they'll probably have a lot here and there, just be mindful. And sometimes you might have to just double check to make sure you're not missed any. So from a gold undercoat, we're just going to start base coating some of the cloth and metal. Again, just going around, picking out any areas you want to be silver. I mean, Slaanesh looks really good when it's got silver sections and gold sections. So at first, that round along the breastplate, I was just going to leave that little Slaanesh circle bit gold, but actually, in hindsight, I think I'll just do it all silver and then paint that like a gem later. Work your way around. And again, like finding little details that feel like should break up the shape a bit more, that look like they should be silver. Also, don't forget the shield. I'm just picking out the main sort of field of the shield, leaving all the filigree and details as like a gold. And using the gold undercoat actually makes it a lot easier to get these metallics over. And you get like a bit of a yellowish shimmer to it, which looks quite nice. And again, if you need to, I'd apply a second coat. I did forget to do the vambrace here as well. So I'm just going to pick that out now and just do a couple of coats. Again, it just helps break up the shape. And then it's a matter of coating over with wash. Now, I like to use purple washes, even on golds, for Slaanesh. It gives them that nice, well, Slaanesh-y vibe. And here I'm just using purple tone from Army Painter. Any purple wash will do, but I really like this one. It doesn't dry too shiny either, like a lot of Citadel washes do. So it's got a nice matte finish to it. Not too matte that it ruins the metallics. just work your way around, and then start to be mindful of obviously pooling, so you can always just get your brush, soak off any excess, especially in those deeper recesses as it's flowed down. Of course, don't forget the shield. Sometimes it's easy to forget the shield. As you can see here, I'm just soaking off any of those pooly bits. Now that model's all dry, I'm just going to do a nice dry brush of silver over those armour sections. I could have done this before picking out any of the purple bits, so you could spray it gold, wash it, and then dry brush, and then start picking out all your purples. But actually, I just wanted to do all the purples and wash them at the same time. You can see it has got a bit of a sheen, the cloth has, and the plume, but it's not like super shiny. We'll sort that out in a bit. And then all I'm going to do now is just tidy up some colours. So I'm getting some silver, just tying up with those. And here I'm using a little bit of mithril, just to add a little bit of like glimmer to the armour. And then just go around like picking up other little bits of a brush as well. So if you need to like do a little highlight here and there. This is like an optional thing, you don't have to do this, especially if we're doing a speed point of view. But things like rivets and stuff I like to pick out. It always looks quite nice. But yeah, you can just keep it with a dry brush if you need to. And then just going to add a little bit more punch to the things that might become gems as well. Then any vials or jars, glasses, bottles, what you want to call them, I'm just going to put those out with white. Not quite decided what the liquid's going to be, so probably blue maybe. Helps contrast against that purple and gold. I'm just going to drop in a little bit more shade as well around some areas that feel like they could do it, especially around rivets and stuff. Sometimes when you do soak off any of that wash, it can remove a bit too much, so just get around if you need to. Just add a little bit more in those recesses. Not much, I'm just using a small brush here to do that. Then I'm going to get some Carmine Dragon and then start applying the gems. Now I did make a bit of a boo-boo here because I did pool it a bit too much, so I'm just going to wipe that off with my finger and then just add a little bit. I mean, you could dry your brush off and soak it off that way, but I just use my finger and wipe it. And again, just work around those other gems too. In the end, I opted for a nice light blue tone for the glass vials. Just apply that all over, and then just where you got some of those nice panels on the actual glass work, just drop a little bit more in there, gives it a bit of depth. Decided to do it on both. Not sure what the mysterious liquid is, maybe some healing potion, maybe something a bit more odd. And I thought I'd try something here. This was more of a, I'll give it a go, see what works, and just whilst it's wet, mix in another colour. Mixing a bit of red with a bit of blue, gives a bit of a purpley sort of magenta tone. I thought, be an interesting idea. Quite like the effect, gives a bit of a wishy-washy look. Again, you don't have to do that, that was just me playing around with colour. Yeah, so at this point I'm just going to get a little bit of white, pick out those edges. There's quite a chunky highlight there, but I can easily work that out a little bit just by moving it to the side a bit. Looks a little bit like a glass vial then, just doing some streaks to one angle. Don't forget to do some highlights on the other one as well. Again, these Painbringers probably have different accoutrements on their belt, so they might not all have vials. Can't remember off the top of my head, but it looks cool. So what I'm going to do now is use that Diabolic Plum and just layer or tidy up those raised areas. I just do like little jaggedy highlights here and there, just to give it a sense of like cloth and maybe a little bit tatty here and there. Just work my way around, just tidying up any raised areas. We'll knock away a little bit of that shine from the wash as well. But as you can see, just on those raised areas, I'm not going all the way into the cracks, just picking out just the peak of the cloth. And same for the plume as well. And as always, you can do little streaks if you want to. I'm just blocking out the colour here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is get a lighter colour, which is Warlock Magenta. The great thing with the Fanatic range of paints is it have a nice little gradient sort of guide on the actual label, so you know roughly what's like the next lighter colour or slightly lighter in the range. So I'm just using this because it's a little bit lighter. Again, just picking out some of those raised areas, doing some little flicks here and there to give a sense of sweeping cloth. And I know there's a little bit of a shiny sort of recess wash in there. Don't worry, we're going to fix that later on. A nice glaze. I'll just do some fine little streaks here on those little tassels as well. Again, this is all optional. You don't have to do this. I just think it looks nice. And then although this is like in the pink spectrum, I'm going to use a colour called Diviner Light just to pick out those edges. It's quite bright. It's almost, there is a danger of it being quite Tron-esque, but don't worry because I'll knock that back with a glaze. But I did want a nice punchy sort of highlight here and there for my magentas. I often find like a bright pink, almost like a very light pastel tone is really good for that. So And again, just make it slightly thinner than the previous highlight as well, so you can see a bit of a gradient of colour. So what I'm going to do now is make a glaze. So I'm going to get some of that Diabolic Plum. I'm just going to thin it down to the consistency of, as they say, thick milk. I often use like contrasts. The thickness of contrast is a nice guide. And then what I'm aiming to do here is just neatly layer that over the cloth. So that's in the recesses, that's on the raised areas. I'm not pooling it like a shade. I'm just neatly layering it all across those areas. That's going to knock back some of that shine as well. And it's going to knock back those highlights and then just slightly lighten those darker areas too. Now I'm just going to get some gloss, add that to my gems. Real simple. I mean, you could spend ages doing like little gem effects. Louise has got a great video for that, but I'm not doing that. Now I'm just going to pick out the back of the shield. I'm not going mad here because you won't see most of this. I'm just going to flat base coat that with a little bit of gold. This gold's close to the spray, but not quite the same. And I'm just going to use that to layer up some of the armor panels because it's got a lot of pearlescent flecks in it. Actually, it's quite nice and it's a little bit thinner. So I can just tidy up any areas that may be a bit blotchy or may have pulled a little bit, but it looks fine. Then after that, I'm just going to get some matte varnish and apply that to the actual cloth. And if there is any like shiny left, that's going to get rid of it. So the glaze got rid of a fair bit, but there's still some of those deeper recesses. Again, this is not something you have to stress out about and worry about, but it just looks good. Just a little bit of super glue on the shield, and then stick that shield on. And there we are, that shield's on nice and solid. So our Myrmidesh Painbringer is done. Pretty chuffed with the end result of this as well. I mean, there's a few things you can add to it. You can do more with the cloth, you could do more with the arm, you can put some scratches on it, you can add some extra leathers in there. I choose not to really go mad highlighting the leathers when I'm doing like massive units or armors and stuff like that. Certainly when you've got so many other details going on there, it's just an extra detail that is just going to slow you down when you're painting. So I always opt to not bother highlighting the leather like you saw on the boots and the belt. So our next model is going to be a Daemonette. Daemonette of Slaanesh. I love Daemonettes of Slaanesh. There's been many variants of Daemonettes over the years. The current plastics are cool. I like them. I did prefer the previous versions by Juan Diaz, a great sculptor. Probably a little bit too grown up for our younger audience, but they were great. However, painting Daemonettes is fun. You can pick any kind of colours you really want to for these. I've seen many tones from like purples all the way to pale tones. And in this video, I'm going to go with pale tones. I did a big army years ago for GW, for the studio, and it was using white undercoat, which was quite quick. It was using like real pastel-y like tones like sky blues and really like vivid pinks, really thin down over white, so then they kind of highlight for you. I was kind of before contrast came out, but you know, it worked, it did the job. So the contrast with these is going to be real pale, almost alabaster skin, punchy sort of like hair colours like pinks and stuff like that. And then I'm going to be doing real big shortcut here for my leather work is I'm going to paint it black. I'm going to use contrast black for this, but I'm going to gloss it. And weirdly, because you've got all the other textures going off, like the crab-like claws and the alabaster skin and the punk rocker hair, it's actually going to look quite nice with just a shiny texture. You don't have to do that option. You could highlight it all up, but I just think it's quick and easy and cool. And you get loads of Daemonettes painted. So let's crack on with Daemonettes. From an undercoat of white, because I want a nice bright alabaster skin tone, I'm just going to get a flesh tone. This colour I'm using is... So from a gold undercoat, we're just going to start base coating some of the cloth, Rado skin. It's going to thin that down pretty much like a wash, really heavily thin it down. So I'm looking at like one paintbrush of paint and like 2-3 paintbrushes of water, so it's quite thin, and I apply that all over. What I'm aiming to do here is for that to sink in the recesses, and when it dries, I get some lighter tones on the raised areas and some of this sort of slightly creaminess in the recesses, as you can see there. So next up is to get some areas blacked out. So this is gonna be like the leather details, like the basque. I like to thin my black down a lot here because what it does is it nicely just goes around the edges because it just flows to those hard edges that are sculpted. So there's a little bit of cheating going on, so you don't have to be so super neat about it. I mean, there is a bit of neatness involved, but not too much. So I just let that do that because it's quite light. If I'm making mistakes, I can easily tidy that up. And then all I'm going to do after that is just do a second coat or a third coat, just in more the central areas. And what you're getting there is you're getting a bit of a build-up of a highlight, but also those deeper recesses you can quite happily just coat over a couple of times without a danger of it going on the skin. And if you need to, pick out the eyes. I like the idea of black orbs on their eyes. Sorry about that, that was a little bit blurry. I'm gonna get some bright pink here. Wicked pink. I'm gonna get some wicked pink here. Thin that down, a bit like a wash. I mean, there are washes and contrast and speed paints out there, but I like the tone of this. So with it being thinned down, I'm gonna apply that over the hair. It's gonna sink in the recesses, slightly tone the raised areas, so it gives it a bit of a highlight, but obviously that creaminess is gonna pop through. Pick out the lips as well, just to start off with. Might go red later, not decided. Also gonna go around the eyes. It's kind of a Slaanesh-y kind of thing. I like the idea of like having like deeper, pinkier recesses. It could be makeup, it could be war paint. I'm just gonna run in the cracks of the eyes. I'm also gonna run some around the side of the head, the scalp there, just for this one, because it looks like, I like to think the hair's been shaved and it's still gonna make its way through. It's that kind of like 5 o'clock shadow effect, but pink. Then I get this colour called Carmine Dragon again, which I've used for the gems on the Saberite. And this is going to be for my crab claws. Again, I'm always starting off with thin colours here. The reason for this is I've got a nice light undercoat. A lot of that brightness is going to punch through, and I can just build up a couple of coats. It seems quite light at the moment. That's fine. That's more intentional because I want to start a bit of a blend on like the wrists, maybe up to the elbows. So I can just dab that. Don't forget to pick out other claws as well. Like the little spikes and horns on the back of the feet. Again, with it being light, you can then just work it into the calves a bit. It's not quite a perfect blend, but from a speed painting point of view, if you're doing hundreds of them, it's quite quick and efficient. Then a second coat, just add a bit more depth. I can see some of that pinkiness starting to show through. So you've got some of those highlights almost coming in from the white. Decide to do the lips as well red. Then I got that Dorado skin, and I'm basically just going to chip that to get like a bit of a crab claw texture. You don't have to do this. I just thought it'd be quite fun just to give it like a bit of a mottled effect on the crab claws. Again, it'll be more subtle when I do another coat over. Then I'm going to get red tone. Again, it's an Army Painter wash. And apply that over the claws themselves and also those areas I've just mottled with that skin tone as well. Just to knock it back so it's a bit more subtle. Again, you don't have to do that. I just think it's a nice effect. Again, you can work it into the calves a bit as well, around the ankles. She's got such a weird club foot. I don't know what's going on with that. Then any like metallic details, I'm mostly going gold here. Just a couple of coats of gold on things like the little Slaanesh-y necklaces, little rivets. Sorry, again, camera seemed to look fine at a distance. And now on screen it's a little bit blurry. But there you are, it's better, a bit clearer. So just picking out some rivets and gold on the chainmail. Yeah, so I did forget about that little strap on the foot, so I'm just going to pick that out with a couple of coats of black, just to bring it in line with the rest of the leather. Now what I'm going to do is get some of that thin black again. I'm just going to run that over the basque. Again, just in places it needed a little bit more black, but also I did splodge a little bit of gold here and there around the rivets, so it kind of hides some of that too. With it being thin, it's just going to line around those rivets and do all the hard work for me. Did forget about those little ringlets in the hair, but don't worry, I've got a plan for that later on, so I'm just going to put those in gold now. Now I'm going to move on to just tying up the skin. I'm using a colour called Brain Matter here because after using that Dorado skin as a wash over white, it's a very similar colour match. So I'm just going to use that to highlight any things like the feet and stuff, but also tie up the skin itself because it looks the same. It's the same finish, which is great. So if it's a bit blotchy or you've got a bit of black on the legs or whatever, you just think it needs a bit more punch, you can just do that. So I'm just picking out any musculature here. You don't have to be too mental about it because I suspect you probably want like 20, 40, 50, maybe more of these, so you don't have to go super mad. Tie around the lips a little bit, and of course the scalp as well. Just make sure it looks not so pink. Just knock it back. I'm just going to use the same colour to pick out like the whites of the eyes a little bit. I mean, you could use a white if you wanted to, but Brain Matte Beige is quite light anyway. Very, very, very light. And then what I'm going to do is just get some of that pink wash I use for the hair, just in places where the highlights are a bit too stark, just to knock them back a bit. I'm not bothered about this going over the gold as well. I'm also going to use it to just do a little bit of makeup. And of course, I want to get some Slaanesh symbology on there. Now, normally I do say do your markings in the base coat stage, but actually because I've got that Brain Matter colour, if I do make a mistake here, I can easily correct with that. But most often than not, when you do markings, it's wise to do it in the base coat stage before washing. This is just going to be like more war paint or markings. So it's kind of like a stylized Slaanesh symbol. And there you go. Just using a bit of Brain Matte Beige. Oops, splodged it there on the basket a little bit. That's fine. I can fix that in a minute too. And then I just decided it needed a little bit more, so I'm just going to do a little design on the back as well. Sometimes I like. So from a gold undercoat, we're just going to start base coating some of the cloth Daemonettes that you can play around with. And this is me just having a bit of a flex because I like to break up the shape a bit more. Helps balance out that pink from the hair as well. Just a little Slaanesh marking. Again, if you're making a mistake, you can tidy back up with a braid matte beige. Do a slightly larger circle in the middle, all optional. And you can vary this across the unit as well. So some places in one place, on the next bit it's somewhere else. And I decided actually I quite like the idea of doing a broader sort of piece of makeup, almost like a circle going around. And then I'm going to get some gloss varnish. Now this is the easiest way of doing leather, like latex and stuff like that. Paint it black and then just gloss varnish it. And that is what I'm doing here from a speed point of view. You've got some nice tones from the skin and the hair and the crab claws, and then you get this different texture from the glossy armour. I mean, if you want to highlight it, that's fine. And then I'm just going to wash over a little bit of purple tone over the hair and the claws as well. And then to finish off, I'm just going to use a little bit of purple tone just to pick over the claws and the hair. And our Daemonette's pretty much ready to play games with. So there we are, our Daemonette is done. I'm pretty chuffed with the end result. I like the addition of doing the gloss varnish on the actual latex bodysuit because it does add a different texture and is visually pleasing. It's not going to be for everyone, but I like it and it stands out on the battlefield. So our last paint guide is going to be a Blissbarb Archer. Now, I love the look of the Blissbarb Archers. I love all the details and the textures on them. They're fun to paint. Well, are they fun to paint, Peachy? Well, they are, but there's just so much on them. So I'm going to try and have some efficiencies for this particular model to try and speed it along, because they are your rank and file and your battle line at the end of the day, and you probably want more than 10. After you've painted 10, you probably won't want to paint another 10 in your life. But if we can find some ways to speed that up, that's what I'm here for. So let's get this Blissbarb Archer and let's try and get it painted in a quick, efficient manner so you can get loads done and have loads of Blissbarb Archers shooting loads of arrows at like Stormcast. Pew pew. Kill those Stormcasts, get some arrows stuck in their faces. They deserve it. Ultramarines deserve it too, but you know, Blissbarb Archers at Age of Sigmar. It's a shame, really. Right, Blissbarb Archer, let's do it. I've said that twice. Let's do it again. I've said that 3 times. Blissbarb Archer. Now again, from a white undercoat, I'm just going to get some flesh wash. You can use whatever you want, any kind of flesh tone. I like a particular flesh tone, which is Guilliman flesh, so I will use that all over, thin down. Apply that around. Again, be mindful of it pooling in places. And of course, I'm going to apply my thin down black all over as well. And with that flesh tone underneath, it will give it a bit of a fleshy sort of browny filter. In some places, like obviously the bow or whatever, or the quiver, you might want to do a couple of coats. Same with the basque. And again, I do this on all the armour panels as well, because it just makes it easy when you're applying gold and silver later on. To be honest, blacking out is probably the most arduous part of painting these models, because, well, they've got lots of details on them. I'll do more coats over things like the leather. Not going to go too much with the golds and stuff and the metallics. But yeah, certainly like basque and this quiver, the leather on the quiver, I'll do a couple of coats of that. But as you'll notice, I'm not going all the way to the edge, because I'll get a highlight then. Then I'm going to get that magenta colour for the robes, very similar to what we did with the Painbringer, and then just pick out all the areas I want cloth and plume, just to tie in nicely with the first model we painted. Again, it's thin down, do a couple of coats. You don't want it too thick. Then I'm going to use the same colour I used for the Daemonette's hair. Again, thin down like I did with the Daemonette as well, so you get some of those highlights popping through. This is like minimal effort, maximum effect, especially from a speed painting point of view. Certainly with Blissbarb Archers, you're doing lots. And then just work around picking out any gold details you need to pick out. Again, like most things, I prefer to do a couple of coats of it and then just build it up. So it might seem quite wishy-washy at first, but actually after a second, third coat, you'll be fine. And because I've blacked out, I don't have to go all the way to the edges, which is great. Again, don't forget things like the weapons, the quiver, picking out those, well, the bits that kind of like frame it. And I love doing this, just get a little dollop of gold or whatever metallic and then just dab on those rivets. So satisfying. To be honest, there's a lot of gold, flesh and black on this model. So once you've got those pretty much picked out, that's pretty much most of the model done really, bar a few little small details. Then keeping to the metallics, just going to get the sword picked out, which is Capesh, sorry, not sword. And of course, like my Myrmidesh Painbringer, do the same kind of vein of silver bits in the gold panels on the shoulder pads as well. And then if I need to, I'm just going to go back over with some black, because it just needs a bit darkening down. I've got some gold on there by accident, so just a couple of coats of black here and there. And again, it's just adding a bit more punch. But when you're sitting down doing a unit of like 10 of these at night, it will go a lot quicker. pick out the eyes. I'm not going to go mad picking out the whites of the eyes. I'm just literally just going to drop some black in there. Black beady eyes looks great on Slaanesh as well. And I'm just going to get a nice jade colour for those fletchings of the arrows, like peacock feathers. They're weird. And then I'm going to get that purple tone and go all over the model. Again, I know it might have some shininess to it in places, not fussed about that. I did give it a better shape this time, so it might be a bit matter. And like all the previous models, I'll just be mindful for it not to wash too much. Now, once I've done my wash, I've noticed there's a couple of times that it's moved some of the colour away. As you can see on the edges there, like a little bit of the purple's gone away. I don't know if that's because it's not cured properly. This is a mutually exclusive 2-1 range of paints. I've just noticed that sometimes if I don't leave it long enough to cure and you put a wash all over, it seems to rub it a bit off. So just go around and tidy back up if you need to. That's what I'm doing here, just going around with all the colours I need, like golds, magentas, just tidying them back up. That's mostly to add a bit of punch to the colour, but also if that weird sort of effect where the wash got rubbed off, kind of acts as a highlight as well. So if you're not bothered about that, you've got yourself a nice cheeky highlight for free. You can see it very prominent on the black there. You don't have to do in the tidying up, you could literally leave your model at that, and then you've got, well, especially if you've got 40 of them, you're doing rank and file, you don't have to sit there forever painting all the details. And after you tied up all the colours, like the golds, the cloth, the hair, you can just leave it at that, get on the tabletop. But what I'm going to do now is add some highlights here and there. So I'm using that slightly lighter magenta just to pick out some of the raised areas. On the weird veil, I just did a little bit more. I mean, it's so annoying that these are rank and file and they are so detailed, and I am cutting lots of corners on these because, you know, you want 50, 40, 30 of these on the tabletop. Painting 10's a chore, so that's why I'm cutting loads of corners. Again, just going for some slightly lighter highlights on the cloth. I guess the key here is just picking out a few elements just to go mad on, so like the cloth here. I'll probably tidy up the skin as well. But the cloth comes first. And I also use that same colour for the hair as well. I've used that final sort of pastely highlight I use on the cloth. I use that for the hair. And if you need to, well, I forgot to do this earlier, just you can go back over a little bit of black over that basque, because I forgot to do it. And then I'm just going to glaze the cloth and then tidy up the skin. So this is the other element. So the skin and the cloth really for me are the standouts. So that's where most of my effort's going to go. So tidy up the skin a little bit. Again, I'm not going to go mad. I've tied up the cloth, I've highlighted the cloth. I'm doing it now on the skin. Again, using that Bray Matter beige. Picking out some muscles, knuckles, extremities. Of course, the face. Again, it's entirely up to you how mad you go. Again, if you think it's gone a bit too light or it's a bit too pale, you can always get that skin wash and just apply another thin coat over just to knock it back a tad, which is what I'm doing here. That was more optional than actually necessary. And then I'm just going to do it over the boots a little bit just to add a little bit more browniness to the veneer of those socks. I dropped a little bit on the gold as well, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Just pick out the gems. I'm using that nice, vibrant carmine colour. And again, as always, after I've done another wash, sometimes I just pick out some bits on the face just to add a bit more punch to it, like knuckles. And this is usually extremities. It helps build up a sense of depth as well. So you don't have to go bonkers with it, but this guy looks like a leader, deserves it. I know he's not a leader, he's just a Blissbarb Archer, but it looks like he deserves it. A little bit more punch to the silver as well, so that's just going to get a little highlight of mithril, not too much. Pick out the shafts of the arrows as well. And then just, you know, a bit of spot colour, just use a bit of pink just to pick out whatever pattern is going off on those fletchings. And I kept forgetting about this face, so I have picked out the hair, I did the skin, and I'm just coating it in just a dark wash so it looks like it's rotten. And then sometimes Slaanesh look great when they've got like scars on them and scratches and stuff. Maybe it's self-flagellation, maybe it's like, you know, from fighting. Some deeper cuts, some more subtle cuts. Drop some of that around the eyes as well. Just a nice ready wash. Looks really good. Makes them look quite evil. Just dropping a little bit red around the eyes. And gloss the gems as well. Always get some gloss on those gems. And I'll just use a little bit of silver to tidy up any areas I wanted a little bit more brighter. Felt that that bow needed a bit more metallic on it. So the archer's done. I'm pretty chuffed again with the end result of that. Again, it is a tricky model, so there are a lot of details to pick out, but using that contrast to black out lots of those sections did speed it up. Honestly, it's It's not the best paint job as a single model when you look at it, but you've got to remember the aim for this is like 20, 30, 40 figures in a couple of evenings. So it's perfect for that. It's the right sort of level when you're trying to batch paint huge collections. It's not going to win me any awards, which is fine, because I'm not going to put it in any painting competition, and I put it in a unit of like 50 Blissbarb Archers. Actually, I'm probably going to use it for Warcry, but I've waffled on enough. Let's talk about some basing. Let's get these guys based up, because you've seen them on the 360s so far, and I love basing models, and I quite like the light deserty tones on Slaanesh stuff. So let's go over and do some basing. So I'm going to get some sandy desert, just apply a couple of dollops on the base to start off with. Got a bit of a large batter brush there, but might move it to a slightly smaller one. But I always like to add a little bit of water when I'm applying this, because then that runs into the cracks. And then I'm just going to get a nice wash. This is like a rusty colour. I really like it, actually. Adds to like kind of like savannah deserty kind of vibe. I'm just going to apply that all over. And I'm just going to dry brush up. I'm using the skin colour here that I used on the Daemonette. I felt like a slightly lighter bone would just be a bit too bright, and that skin colour seemed perfect. So I'm going to get that rusty wash again and just be a bit more controlled, dropping little bits here and there, just add a little bit more depth to the base. And then I'm just going to rim a couple of coats of your favourite rim colour on the actual rim. And then next up is some grass tufts. I really love these gamer grass tufts, especially the really small ones, the tiny ones. And this beige tone works really well with that kind of sandy sort of savannah look I'm going for. So yeah, I've fallen in love with these grass tufts. Perfect. So there we are. I've painted 3 Slaanesh figures, all with different sort of like levels of efficiencies. The Painbringer being probably the easiest, because I'm using metallic spray to do all the legwork. The Daemonette being a little bit more convoluted, because I'm using a white undercoat, thinning down some like flesh tones to basically be my skin wash. But then you've got to be neat and pick out all the leathers, but you have fun with the crab-like claws, you can have fun with the hair. So that was good. So Blissbarb Archers, they are fun models. I do like the look of them, but I just think there's too much for a rank and file figure. It's all those straps, there's just a lot going off, and they're perfect for elite and if you're having a handful of them, but for rank and file, when you need like anything from 10 plus to 20, 40, 50, whatever, they're not easy to paint. But finding those efficiencies, like I've done with like treating it as a sock or like a ankle calf tight with like straps over the top of it, that works. I learned this from doing my Cypher Lords. I did some Cypher Lords which had a Slaanesh look, because most of my Warcry warbands I was going for a Slaanesh vibe, and just using those contrast speed paints to do the skin, to do the leather work, just made it so much easier and so speedier. Granted, this Blissbarb Archer, you know, in hindsight, is probably not the best paint job as a single miniature. It's not intended to be a single miniature. If there was, you know, if I had more time in my schedule, I would probably have more shots of like the unit being painted up. But I'm kind of treating this as almost like a test model for my Blissbarb Archers, as I do more down the line inevitably for Warcry. So I know it's going to work if I'm doing like 10 or 15 of them or more. So that's something to bear in mind when you are doing these things as individuals on their own, and you're doing like the army painting kind of side of stuff. They don't look especially awesome. When you're based up, adds an extra level of awesomeness to them, but you are doing it for a unit, not as a single miniature, and that's something to always get your head around. And I had a few crises during this video. I'm like, oh, it's a bit rubbish, oh, this could be a bit better. Then it's like, no, Peachy, you're doing this as if you're painting it of a unit of 40. Remember that. You're not doing this as an individual figure. You're not entering this into Golden Demon or a painting competition. You're doing this to help people get these things on the tabletop. So even then, I still get hit by that morale side things. I'm like, oh, it could be better, because you're putting yourself out to the world. You guys, you're watching it, and you think, that's a bit awful. That looks like it's painted by a dog. And maybe it was. Maybe it was painted by a dog. Maybe I didn't do it at all. Besides, I'm waffling on now. Well, as always, thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found something useful. Again, this is a guide to getting stuff done fast on the tabletop, so do bear that in mind. If you've got some thoughts about what you'd like to see, drop that in the comments as well. If you've got your own speedy ways of doing Slaanesh and Blissbarb Archers, please throw that into the comments, because I'm sure there's many people watching this now that are like, quite like what you've done there, Peachy, but I want to know about how to do it for this colour or this colour or this colour. So do throw some suggestions into the comments. A big thank you, as always, to these beautiful people, as well as the rest of the patrons. You're all awesome. I mean, obviously these are on a different tier, so they get their names there, but every single patron that supports me, I'm indebted to you, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you guys allow me to paint my kinks and do cool stuff on TV. It's great. But yes, I love you. You could too be a patron as well. I have my Patreon link in the description, so do consider it. It's anywhere from £3 where you just get the videos a little bit earlier, sometimes longer, depending on how efficient I am with my editing. And you just get to, you know, join an amazing Discord community as well. And there's lots of tiers, lots of different levels, all the way up to me giving you one-to-one tuition for 2 hours, where you can ask me anything and I'll teach you anything. The only thing I can't really do is non-metallic metals particularly well, because there are far better people out there that can do it, and airbrushing. That's the only thing I'm a bit weak at. But yes, thank you as always. Love you very much. And in the words of Slaanesh, we love nipples. Bye. Now, the god of Slaanesh is my favourite deity of the Chaos Gods to pick. But what is Slaanesh? If you don't know and you're new to this, oh, I'm getting bright light coming in. Oh, my days. That's Sigma getting angry right now. He's like, stop talking about Slaanesh. He's a pervert. Sorry, Sigma. Just go away for a bit. Oh, why'd you have to be so bright right now? You were like literally for like the last hour, you weren't even there. And oh, I'll have to just go with it, Honor. Maybe I have to redo my intro. Maybe I have to redo that as well. I'll redo my intro. Oh no, it's getting darker. Is it getting darker? So the first model I'm going to begin with is the Myrmidesh Painbringer. Are you getting darker now? Oh, this blooming curtain. Oh, just stay light or stay dark. Just pick one. Just pick one. I don't care which one you pick, Sigma. Either stay and watch or go away. So sitting over my shoulder, like jumping in and out, like a, I don't know, overactive child. Right, Myrmidesh Painbringer.